too.
Behind a nice big building over there.
Yeah. Well, I was banging on your face 5 minutes ago.
Gonna give me. I'm thinking I'm gonna be like Two-Face and Batman.
You got what?
One side and one side different.
Flex both sides of your face. Not like.
Still no? You want to try?
Try a different browser.
Okay.
It's so funny. You know, I went to the Apple store and they told me cut like delete Firefox. What? How's this browser? And I go on Chrome, it's like your Google ad. I say Chrome, all the way, Chrome, all the way.
You have the edit.
I mean, I am, but it's like so slow trying to open up its own stuff. That's all right.
Yeah, they'll get it again also. They'll get it again.
We don't have any audio yet. They just looking at the interesting. Yeah, I know.
So I get to make faces now.
Yeah, do that. Make faces when they come in the door. Yeah,
I don't know.
Make faces.
I could be. I have problems now. People can like recognize me and post pictures of me, and wow, I can't quite hide anymore, and that's a bit of a challenge.
Don't make funny faces. You don't have the apps on your phone, so you wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah, but you know, but my daughter may see something, and then what do I do? Oh, hey, hi, how you doing?
Funny faces. Because you know they'll stick something on your picture real quick. So one thing that is
Actually, I think that someone sent a picture of me once, and it was my face, but it wasn't my body, or they're like taking two different pictures and put them together. This is weird.
Oh, they do those things with those funny videos with your head stuff on them. What do they call it? Knick-knacks? No, I'm not. But it's one of those apps that any person can use. Oh, I got it. Wait, but like, no, I just people send me his videos and I'm like, okay. My kids and I we like to do the yo-yo and hoops. You know those two crazy things. Yeah. No, you're okay. And they talk really fast and sound like I'm overdose of coffee and then they keep going. Yeah. Like when we're in mall and we're waiting for my husband to shop. Go in the cart section and we'll be like, he could just find us.
That was some serious emphasis placed on, and we're waiting on my husband to shop. Yeah.
We buy too many different useless things. He has a list. So then we just sit there and like, yo-yo. Useless things make you trip and drag. It's mad. What's this on the list?
Yeah. You just gotta just walk through.
It's like $1 million. Yeah. And I got my little travel thing. Yeah.
Wow.
He makes me mad. He's like, you can buy a mouthwash this big for $2.99. Just buy this one for 99 cents. You can lift it with a claim. I'm like, relax.
I've seen some articles recently where they are commenting on the fact that these bulk stores are essentially selling you items that you just really are not going to use in any reasonable time frame. You know,
But you just
so
intrigued by this,
you just say, oh well, here's this big thing, let me get it.
Yeah.
You know, and then we get there because the product is like, okay, you know, I'm going back to Nassau, so let me get like this huge bottle of Tide, right? And 6 months later, you're still trying to use the Tide, and it had an expiry date of like 3 months before. Just, pardon?
Tide expires?
The powder stuff certainly does, and the liquids, because it's only it has a half-life. There's a point at which it's going to break itself down and it's not going to be as strong as it was. So it's not that you cannot use it, but it's not going to be as effective.
Well, my friend has like a big PJ's pen, which is why people in Bahamians would actually double the Tide.
Oh yeah.
I'm just saying.
Oh, okay.
I need this to be really clean. Well, you have that big thing. If you are experiencing that, you may think this is not using enough. It's that. It's just not as it was.
Or if when you get a big container, you figure, you know, well, I'm going to get a scoop to take something out. I'll just like scoop it right out because there's just so much in there. So I don't know. I don't know if we help ourselves or hurt ourselves. Is all this being broadcast what we're talking about? Oh, excellent. Consumer advice with our group.
should bring it back. She might hot as well.
Whoa.
Yeah, you might have to do that. Okay, okay. They don't do that.
That's the session now. You sure that's the session? The session.
All right.
Oh, you got some music on now.
Oh, that's serious feedback. Okay, maybe it's my phone.
There you went again. I think it's muted.
Good afternoon. Welcome, Bahamas, to the second installment of our Get the Facts webinar sponsored by the Active Liberal League. As part of our mandate, we have organized a series of Get the Facts Summit webinars around the questions in the upcoming constitutional referendum. The first presenter in our series last Tuesday was Mrs. Marianne Bethel, who spoke on the history of equality in the Bahamas. You can view the webinars at our Active Liberal League channel on YouTube. Today, Mr. William Fountain is with us to present on Bill number 3. This bill seeks to ensure that a Bahamian father of a person born out of wedlock can pass on his citizenship to his child upon proof of paternity. You can join the Google Hangout now by emailing activeleadershipleague@gmail.com. Mr. Fountain received his early education at Queen's College and then continued his education in Canada at the Granville Christian College. He studied history at the University of Toronto, earning his BA, and then moved on to law at the University of the West Indies, where he obtained an LLB and the Certificate of Legal Education. He was called to the Bahamas Bar in 1994. Mr. Fountain joined Cash Fountain in 1994 and is senior and managing partner of the firm. Since joining the firm, Mr. Fountain has honed an expertise in chamber work, particularly in the areas of conveyancing and mortgages, probate, trust planning, and commercial contracts. He loves being out on a boat and wishes he had more time to enjoy fishing. He is married and has one daughter. Welcome, Mr. Fountain.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and to Neil and the Active Liberal League Group. Thank you for hosting this web broadcast, which will hopefully have an extensive viewership, and for inviting me to participate in this series of informational sessions to speak on the proposed constitutional amendment, often referred to as Bill number 3, in respect of Article 14 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I would also like to thank Mrs. Marianne Bethel for her most informative presentation, which has laid the groundwork by providing the historical background of inequality in the Bahamas, the domestic historical development of addressing structured discrimination and inequality between the sexes within our Bahamaland was noteworthy, as was the explanation of the Bahamas' various international obligations to which we as a country have agreed and for which amendments to our laws, including the Constitution, are required. The background to this most important constitutional amendment having been addressed, I will delve right into Bill number 3. The purpose of Bill number 3 is to eliminate inequality and discrimination between men and women as it relates to the granting of citizenship to a child born out of wedlock. The inequality and discrimination which currently exists is that a Bahamian woman can pass her citizenship onto her child when that child is born out of wedlock, but no similar right exists in our law for a Bahamian man. Because the right exists for a single Bahamian woman to pass on her citizenship, then it ought to exist for the single Bahamian man as well. The proposition is that because the right exists for the Bahamian single woman, it ought to exist for the single man. And to that end, the essence of Bill number 3 is to allow an unmarried Bahamian father to pass his citizenship onto his child born out of wedlock upon legal proof that the Bahamian father is in fact the father of the child. Although not specifically contained in the constitutional amendment, the Status of Children Act is the law upon which proof of paternity would be established for a child born out of wedlock. The amendment to this Act of Parliament would establish 2 grounds upon which a man can be legally proven to be the father of a child born out of marriage. A, by genetic DNA evidence, or B, by a court's of competent jurisdiction decision. This proposed amendment will serve to eliminate discrimination against men by creating equality as between a Bahamian man and a Bahamian woman for those children born out of wedlock in respect of passing on their citizenship to all, as the amendment would give to the Bahamian man the right to pass on to his children born out of wedlock his citizenship. It would matter not whether the child is born inside or outside of the Bahamas. Your father, once established, is your father. The Constitution, being the highest law in the land, would, with the passing of this proposed amendment, give equal treatment and status to all parents and to all children in respect of the granting of citizenship, regardless of whether or not the child is born within a marriage or outside the bounds of marriage. Right of citizenship of the child, which would not be affected by the prior death of the parent. And what I mean by that is that if the parent dies before the child is born, then that child would still be a Bahamian citizen at birth. As a part of reviewing the law for this presentation, I inquired of several persons their views on the 4 proposed constitutional amendments, and specifically Bill number 3. What I found from this informal survey I wish to bring to your attention. Firstly, most people did not know what each of the 4 bills were about. There was generally a vague idea about inequality, mixed in with a focus on certain aspects on the package of bills which have garnered much press. Secondly, some people simply said they were voting no to all 4 proposed constitutional amendments, which is, in my view, most unfortunate. Each of the amendments or bills ought to be considered separately and distinctly from one another, as each seeks to amend and address a specific part of the Constitution in which there is inequality and discrimination. Whilst as a whole they address several injustices, they independently seek to eliminate a specific area of inequality in the Constitution. Each bill should be voted on for its individual and separate merit, regardless of what is voted on in respect of the other bills. The third conclusion I reached was that many persons appeared to not fully understand each bill and its implications in law. I therefore encourage all of the listening audience to take this time and to get as informed as possible. To this end, I encapsulate the proposed constitutional amendment to Article 14, or Bill number 3, which is not retroactive, to state, it permits and to give a right to, in our Constitution, for an unmarried Bahamian man to pass his Bahamian citizenship onto his child born out of wedlock, as that right presently exists for a Bahamian woman, subject to the man proving that he is in law the father of the child, and for such citizenship to be passed on to the child, even in the event when the parent dies before the child is born. As an attorney, I can vividly recall conversations with male clients and advising them that their sons and daughters were not entitled under our laws to have the citizenship of their father simply because they were born out of wedlock. And I remember explaining to male friends and family members who were not married that their child could not be a citizen of the Bahamas through them because the law prohibited it. I am sure that many of you in the listening audience can find examples amongst your family and friends where a child would not be a Bahamian citizen because of the law as it presently exists. This proposed constitutional amendment would eliminate that injustice and make right a wrong. Thank you. And enjoy your process. Any questions that you may have?
Thank you so much, Mr. Fountain. Thank you so much, Mr. Fountain. Do we have any questions?
I was at a panel where Marion, Bethel, oh sorry. You're everywhere. Marion,
Yeah, it's alive. It's not.
Marion, Bethel, Jeff Lloyd, Lisa Benjamin, and Noel Nichols were on a panel on Saturday, hosted by the Citizens for Constitutional Equality as well as the Zonta Club. And a lady raised a concern, particularly in relation to Bill number 3, saying that there was this fear that married women or women in relationships with men were concerned about the possibility that their husband or boyfriend or domestic partner, whatever the case may be, would be excited about the prospect of being able to grant citizenship to any children that they fathered outside of the relationship. So I said to them, as is in every instance, like one of the main concerns with marital rape bill that people were proponents of was saying, oh, women are going to go and claim rape when they're just having problems with their spouse. And I told them that you can't be fearful of the minority of people that are going to violate the law, abuse the law, do this sort of thing. It kind of brought that to mind for me in some respect. What would you say to someone who came with that sort of frame of mind?
Well, I think that my first response would be that if this is a concern of a married woman with respect to having a child outside of the marriage, the husband having a child outside the marriage with another woman, one of the things that presently exists in our laws in the Bahamas is that there's a presumption that when two people are married, any children that they have are children of the marriage. So I'm not sure that the issue that is raised is something that would be a legal concern as things exist at the moment. And I think that we also have to be concerned that ultimately this is a benefit for the child. Whilst it is something that is passed on to the child from the parent, it is the child that is going to become a citizen and get all rights of citizenship in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And that is a very good and positive thing. We don't want to deprive someone of that right simply because the child was born outside of the bounds of marriage.
When you speak to the fact that it's retroactive, can you give us a little bit more of a picture of what that means for those of us that aren't familiar with the legal terminology?
By retroactive, what it means is that once the law is, presuming the constitutional amendment passes and it becomes, which thereafter must become law, then it will be as of the date that it is passed that it will become effective to affect all children born after that date. Children born to a man that was unmarried at the time, prior to the date of the enactment, would not get the benefit of becoming a citizen. So it's a law that works looking forward and to all kids born after its date. It does not affect those kids born prior to the date of the change in the law. And that's what retroactive addresses.
I'm of the opinion that they should have had a certain level of retroactivity. Would it be possible, once the law changes, for them to contest the status of a child who was born under these circumstances? Will it make it an easier path towards citizenship, possibly?
It could possibly make it an easier path, but I don't think that it would be a law that could be challenged in that respect, because unless the amendment specifically states that it will affect children born prior thereto, those are always what we call forward thinking. They're always progressive. They're not looking back. So the amendment would have to specifically address that question.
Are there any aspects of this bill that we should be concerned about, or any sort of repercussions that we should be concerned about, or aware about, or educated about prior to voting?
In my view, I'm not aware of anything that would be a cause for concern. I think that unlike some of the other bills that are garner much emotional response and legal debate, whilst I may not agree with all of it, I think that this bill in its very essence is not, doesn't garner that type of a guttural response, because at the end of the day, all that is being achieved is to give citizenship to a Bahamian child that ought to be entitled to a Bahamian child. And the fact that it can pass through a mother to her child is the basis and the essence of eliminating the inequality, so that it can pass from a father to their child. So in terms of potential repercussions or consequences, I'm not aware of any. I've not thought of any in my discussions, in my informal surveys and speaking to people. There's really not much concern about this particular bill. And speaking to other lawyers, there's not a sense of some sort of dread that could be associated with it. It is relatively simple and straightforward, and it is just such a good, positive bill in the sense that it is creating equality and removing discrimination.
What, if you could give a general figure or an idea, what would be sort of the majority, I don't know if you call it population or demographic, that you think would be affected the most by this bill?
I can take an educated guess to that one. Certainly not a sociologist and not delved into who would be primarily affected. But my thought would be that given that the majority of parents in this country are younger, that they would be the ones that would be primarily affected. And I think this is not a bill that affects that group of persons that have gone away and gone to school. Any number of Bahamian men have fathered children outside of being married. Whether the child was born in the Bahamas or born in the United States or born in Germany, it exists throughout the entire spectrum of our age demographics. So I can't say that it will affect one group more than another, except that I think that it affects all of us equally.
Greg, you have a question?
I can figure it out. I got hit with the speaker on this one.
Just the speakers.
Okay, listening to a lot of the conversation, in the community and on the talk shows, you hear people speak of these bills, and it's going to touch on, I think it's bill number 1 as well. They speak as though, if passed, then citizenship is going to be automatic for the kids. Is it indeed going to be automatic?
Yeah.
Yes. My apologies. I'm trying to learn this technology as I go along. If the bill is passed, then citizenship for the child will be automatic. And what it does is, even though this bill addresses this particular aspect of the Constitution in terms of a child born out of wedlock, in its entirety, what the Constitution will allow by its various provisions under Chapter 2 would be that a child born to a Bahamian citizen, male or female, will be a citizen of the Bahamas, period.
And also, can you speak to the situation now that men face? Because I also heard people speak to currently, if a Bahamian man has a child with a foreign woman outside of the country, in order for him to obtain citizenship, he would in essence have to adopt his own child.
I'm sorry, you need to repeat that.
Yeah, no, I said I've heard that if a Bahamian man was to have a child with a foreign woman outside of the country, as it stands, the only way he would be able to obtain citizenship for his child would be to adopt his own child. Is that indeed the case?
Yes. That, as the law presently stands, that is indeed the case, because a child born to a Bahamian father and is born outside of the country will not be a Bahamian citizen if that man is not married. And in order for that man to give his child the rights of citizenship, if he wanted it to be done at an early age, meaning under the age of 18, then he would have to adopt that child. But under the Constitution, there's another provision that addresses the right of a child at 18 to apply for citizenship. Now, of course, the big difference there is that you are applying. And by an application, in its essence, means it can be denied. And this counteracts that, so that it's not an application, it is simply automatic once proof of paternity is established. And that's key, because we don't want the system to be abused where persons who simply say, oh, I'm a Bahamian, and then go ahead and say that you will be entitled to citizenship. No, there is grounds that Parliament has considered to work in conjunction with the Constitution, which I referred to earlier in my little chat about the Status of Children Act, that would prevent the arbitrary granting of citizenship. It will have to be only to a Bahamian father, or through a Bahamian father.
Mr. Fountain, I actually have friends who are in this situation. They're adults, but their father is Bahamian and their mother is not. And in the process of the application for citizenship, their mother has passed. And so there are several documents outstanding, and I just was curious to see what recourse they have, if any, to complete the application in that case. I know it's kind of not, but I just wanted to know because that's very near and dear to their hearts.
That's fine. I will answer the question as best as I am able to. There is another provision in there's a provision actually in Article 14 of the Constitution that addresses the citizenship of a child where the parent dies either before the child is born. And I think that certainly by implication, it would apply to a child making an application for citizenship where the parent of the child dies while that application is being processed. And ultimately, once the appropriate citizenship of the parent can be established, even if the parent dies, it's a matter of fact and a matter of law that they are a citizen. So whatever documentation that was got to achieve the initial application should be able to be reproduced. And the fact that the parent has died ought not to, in my view, affect the application process and, if applicable, the granting of citizenship to that child. You're absolutely welcome. My pleasure.
So as it currently stands, can you give us sort of a quick snapshot? A Bahamian woman married to a non-Bahamian has a child. What does that picture look like in terms of citizenship for that child as it currently stands, and then how is it impacted by the bill?
A Bahamian, make sure I got that properly. A Bahamian woman married to, who's she married to? To a non-Bahamian. Then the citizenship of that child would be through the father. The child would have the right to apply for citizenship in the Bahamas through his mother once the child attains the age of 18. Yeah, now let me also add, a couple of the questions are a little bit outside the purview of Bill number 3, but I'm trying my best. And rather than simply deferring all those questions to the persons that will come later, I'll give the best answer that I possibly can.
That's it? That's it?
I guess lastly, I would just ask, what advice or what would you say to men that I hear saying that they would rather take the right away from the male in terms of passing on the citizenship?
Take it away from the woman.
From the, hold on, wait, maybe I'm getting the bills mixed up.
I think that was bill number 2.
That's bill number 2, eh?
Spouse.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. Okay, well, forget that question then. No more questions. Trini, you good?
No, I mean, I think it's, I don't have any more questions, but I would like to thank you for a really clear presentation. Very clear, thank you. I hope that whoever watches it understands it now.
This is the most happy dancing we've had.
I'm still on here.
Yes.
Do you want to talk? Do you want to talk? And remind people to tune in next week,
Mute.
same time.
Oh, yes, and please join us next week for bill number 1? Well, 1, 2, or 4. Same time next week, 7 p.m. Please do join us. And thank you for listening in and watching us. Bye. Have a great evening.